Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, depending on what part of the world you are joining us from. I am Alex Faust, your host of Conversations at the Edge. And today I am very excited to have Oksana Esperard joining us and our community for a very important topic and extremely relevant given what's going on around the globe today. And for those of you who are not familiar or haven't met Oksana in the past, her work supports behavioral change through elevating human and organizational well-being. She is a master meditation initiator and guides companies in the creation of what she calls wellness cultures by inviting executives and employees into a deeper relationship with themselves. And today, Oksana's proprietary approach to well-being and mindfulness work with the leading edge businesses like Microsoft, BuzzFeed, and MIT is reimagining the workplace. And where they are seeing it as an energetic source of well-being that really allows us all to experience the world as a magnificent and interconnected place. I'm very excited to host her for a conversation today, talking about overcoming negative emotions, how to think fresh, because there's a lot of that negative energy kind of going around the world at the moment. So excited to talk about what we can do as leaders and then also what we can be doing for our organization. So Oksana, welcome back to Conversations at the Edge. And where are you calling in from today?
Thank you, Alex. Excited to be back. I'm calling in from Portugal, Lisbon.
Fantastic. Well, as I mentioned, and as everybody is currently experiencing, there's a lot going on in the world today. So I'm curious to just start off, what would be your first piece of advice for people to manage the stress and the anxiety coming from all the external global factors that are affecting us?
Yes, absolutely. It depends how people react. Of course, we all have different triggers, different stimuli, different points of connection. And those that tend to really get impacted from negative news, my recommendation would be to limit news intake or surround it into check it once in the second half of the day so it doesn't determine the start of the day. Because what most of us do, we wake up, we grab the cell phone, we read what's happening, and that's already sets up the tone. And if someone like me, for example, got really emotional about reading and getting those updates, it's very hard to pivot afterwards to having a beautiful, productive, and creative day. If the news don't, and by news, I mean not only TV, but social media, conversations, and other interactions. It doesn't mean that you cannot or need to completely abstract yourself. Just shift it to a limited period of time, second half of the day, where you already kind of did the biggest productivity push. That would be my number one suggestion right now.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And just a reminder for the folks who are here live, if you have questions, feel free to type them into the chat. The last 10 minutes we will dedicate for your questions. So feel free to type them in at any time and we'll get to them in a little bit. So Oksana, I'm curious, what role do you see negative emotions playing for humans? Can they ever serve a positive purpose? Can they ever be, productive or helpful, those negative emotions, or should we try to get rid of them and focus solely on the positive?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Alex, because it's only human beings who tend to divide things into negative and positive, black and white, right? In nature, things are. We have negative emotions. We have what we call negative emotions. We have positive emotions, and both have roles to play. What we call negative emotions like fear or worry and anxiety, these are life-saving functions that are, if we're taking this away, we could just walk off the roof or go into an unsafe street. We can join into interactions that are not healthy or safe physically, mentally, emotionally for us. So it is very important to have those defense structures in place. That's why nature have them in place, right? If you look at gazelles, all the animals in nature have fears or defense mechanisms, aggressions. These are part of the reflexes that we have as animals. Now, what happens with the human beings is that we tend to dwell in the negative emotions long past the trigger event. And that's what really starts to interfere with our mental health, productivity, well-being. And that what needs training, right? Animals kind of, something happens, they run, they are fearful, they get over it pretty fast. The hormones switch. Us human beings keep on going, keep on going, keep on going. And that's where we have the notion that negative emotions have negative impact on us. It's that lingering that has negative impact, not the emotion or trigger itself. And that's where we need to do some work to overcome, stop, block, process, heal, and work towards well-being actively.
Can you talk about some of the strategies to kind of move through the initial, reaction to how to, move through without the negative consequences?
Right. It depends which emotion is being triggered, right? So for example, the fear, stress, anger, any kind of emotions that are really spiking, like you can feel the heat in your body, you can feel wanting to fight, you can feel wanting to run, anything that is really, really activating, that activates cortisol and adrenaline in our bloodstream, that, number one, you need time. In order for those hormones to just wash off in the blood, it's at least 30 minutes. And generally, it helps to take action. So anything like going to the gym, going for a walk, like actively moving them out would help. Because you cannot, for example, you know that I'm strong in meditation, mindfulness. If you're in extreme amount of anger, sitting down in mindfulness or meditation is not a good idea at that moment. You will just aggravate it so much that you might feel way worse than when you started the technique, right? So that's one part of emotions. And there are the other parts of emotions where we feel severe sadness and grief, loss, empathy towards something, and is just this really, really gooey, stuck feeling that almost like borderline depression, right? It's really, really lethargic. Again, with those, movement is good, but it's a different type of movement. You're not acting out, you're moving to keep the momentum, to let it process. It's not a good idea to just, sleep, but depending, like for example, if it's grief, sleeping, distracting, watching positive movies, having some positive distractions, these are good and welcomed. And there you also might introduce techniques like journaling, because you want to get it out of your system. If you have something suppressed that is really bothering you and it doesn't find the outlet, that doesn't help us to heal and process that. So talking to someone, going to therapy, writing it out as a journal, creating some kind of art out of it to help it express itself. The worst thing that we could do is suppress and pretend like it's not there, right? Like, let's keep going. We need to be productive. We need to be on edge, and we kind of brush it off. That's where we bottle a lot of stuff. So I think it's important to recognize what to use when.
Great. And just on this topic, I think we're talking a lot about the external factors that are causing these emotions. How about internal factors that are causing these emotions, such as negative self-talk, when we're kind of creating that stress and anxiety and those feelings for ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it happens more than we're willing to recognize. We have, there's this old Chinese proverb or story or fairy tale that a grandson is talking to his grandfather, and the grandson has this emotion that he cannot contain. And the grandfather said, well, we all as human beings have two wolves in us. One is really angry and frustrated and sad, and another one is nice and compassionate and kind. And the grandson is saying, which wolf is winning? And the grandfather said, the one that you feed. So that's where our human consciousness needs to take place. We have both sides. There is no way around it. And a lot of time by culture, by what we learned from our parents, And generally, by lack of education or self-awareness, we're just constantly criticizing ourselves. Like, even if you just watch for a day, how do you talk to yourself? That will show a lot. And awareness or mindfulness is the first key to change, is first to recognize, okay, this is happening. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person. Doesn't mean I'm a bad leader or employee. It's just part of my human conditioning that happened even before I get a choice to take it on or not. Now it's the matter, okay, you recognized creating strategies that could work for you, for your environment, for your pace, for your culture, personal and professional, and you work slowly. And it's the importance to realize here is that the conditioning, it happened gradually. It was one event and then it gradually was reinforced. The reconditioning or rethinking of anything also will happen gradually. So it cannot just be like, okay, New Year is here, or March 1st, I'm going to be a positive person. Let's go. It's going to take more than that.
Yeah, and I've been talking a lot about kind of learning about perspective and switching my perspective as an individual and a leader to see opportunity rather than problem spaces. And I'm curious, what your opinion is of that, and any tools or advice you'd recommend to kind of go from seeing a problem to then seeing an opportunity, and training yourself to shift your mindset in that regard.
Yeah, it's actually an amazing strategy and a technique to help ourselves not to get triggered or traumatized by whatever event. And it's a psychological tool where instead of even the word problems or issue, you start to convert everything and reframe everything as opportunity or a challenge. The situation is the same. You cannot change what is happening, but it depends how you're going to look at it. And all of us will have different tonalities to it, right? So reframing it as opportunity, challenge, growth, orientation, that's really healthy. And as a result, you have different energy and underlying motivation to go through the same scenario, that if you would label it a problem, misfortune, bad luck, poor me, and all that victim mentality, the situation will not change, but your energy and your attitude and even your luck will change.
Thank you. Would you say that there are group strategies to overcome these negative emotions, or it's something that needs to be practiced more on a personal level? So like, I'm curious if there's anything that a company or an organization can be doing around this to kind of lift the negative emotions from having negative effects.
Well, first, absolutely, because human being is by definition as a social creature. We are not designed to be alone. Anyone who felt severe loneliness in COVID time can confess to that, right? It's really, really hard for us. We have this notion to want to share, to want to express, to want to even converse. It doesn't matter if it's a stranger or a longtime friend. And therefore, having a supportive group of people around really helps. The mindset that is collective is reinforcing the individual consciousness. Why do I say that? Individually, yes, we have the right to override something and choose, do we want to feed the angry wolf or do we want to feed the kind wolf? But sometimes we just may have a bad day. The weather might have impact on us. The hormones can shift. Some event happened. And if you have this supportive, positive, reinforcing network around you, it is studied that we will match the frequency of the whole, the frequency of the group. We will be able to overcome that faster. It's not about each individual being perfect before we're entering in the group. Is each of us will go off at different times, but collectively we'll still hold the higher frequency of the emotional level, right? And therefore, the openness of the companies to look at individuals as a whole and recognizing that there must be bad days, there might be good days, there might be different life scenarios that are happening, which I think on the world scale, we really stepped up. Within this 2-3 years with COVID, with all this remote working, it really pushed the companies to go up on that level. What I see still not enough is leadership being involved on day-to-day, right? They put programs on well-being, but then they don't attend. They say about vulnerability and openness and having conversations, and then it's not reciprocated, or when employees actually try to share something, there's so much going on that they don't feel being heard within the company. And so I think what is important is to set the examples by the leadership and having that as a cultural norm. But I don't think I'm saying anything new, right? It's the matter of execution, because we all have these intentions, but execution still could continuously be improved, actually.
Do you have any examples or stories of organizations that have actually executed on this particularly well, like actually taking a proactive approach when it comes to the mental health of the employees?
Well, I have one example that is from one of my clients that is definitely, I've been with this company for 5 years. We started with Mindfulness for Leadership team. And with COVID, we actually found an opportunity to offer it for the entire group, because everything went online, right? So for the company name is New Horizons in South Florida. And Florida Vocational Institute. They have 2 companies there. It's computer learning centers. And as I said, the leadership team kind of took the buy-in, and we've been working quarterly with them to work on their mindset, emotional well-being, mindfulness, mental wellness. And now they literally embrace and they extend to their teams individually as a leader. They are empowered. So let's say if there is a client customer support leader, he's empowered or she's empowered to support his team, and they individually reached out. So if there are different life cases and scenarios that are happening in people's lives, and so not only the people are empowered, but then the leaders are also reaching out and saying, okay, I want you to help this person, and that's how we're going to go about it. So it really goes into that whole almost like family culture and the recognition of that aspect. And as a result, I mean, they really had almost none turnover during the COVID times, where the turnover was huge for a lot of companies, and that flexibility. Another example that is not one of my clients, but I've heard about their case, and I thought, out of all companies, like really, NASA, the cosmic program, you would think that they actually would support and reinvent and rethink and have opportunity for people to express and disagree and do all this crazy invention stuff, which creativity requires disagreement, right? To say something new, you need to disagree with something that has already been invented. But historically, they actually were horrible. They were very conformist because nobody wanted to look bad. Nobody wanted to make mistake, and culture was not challenging or giving that freedom to people. As a result, they had numerous deadly mistakes of spacecrafts burning at a launch, astronauts drowning or suffocating in the space, and they really paid that price with human lives until they finally recognized that that is a cultural issue that they need to have, and they turned it around. They started to work on the culture to let people challenge and express themselves and not being afraid on all levels of organization, especially like engineers. They're very logical, right? There's no emotion expression there, and they really worked. And they have amazing results when it comes to launches and restarts, and even the opportunity to cancel launch, which is really expensive, to know that there's something that if one person does not agree, they respect that now. So it's been phenomenal.
Great, thank you for sharing that. So as we approach the 10-minute mark of our 10 minutes left of our conversation, I do want to get to some of the questions that are coming through the chat. So if you have questions, please feel free to type them in. But one is from Cameron, and they're asking, what are your thoughts on techniques to reframe or to use concepts such as holy indifference to temporal challenges?
I would like to clarify what holy indifference is. Maybe I'm not
I'm
familiar with the phrase. Cameron, if you want to clarify that, from what I understand, is kind of putting the issue aside and pretending like it's not there. I would say that I actually have this technique called emotional spill plan. And in really highly triggering situations where the trigger is so grand that the nervous system or the person feels overwhelmed instantly, where it makes them incapable of pure life functioning, decision making, being thinking logically, being productive. That's what's called, the system is really, really overwhelmed by what happened. In that case, that what I would call holy indifference is actually a really good strategy and technique. Putting and just isolating yourself, putting it in a box, sealing it and shipping it somewhere and not looking at it until a person has a chance to stabilize the nervous system, heal, process, get mentally and emotionally stable before they could even attempt to address that challenge or the situation. And that is very valid and very useful in some extreme case scenarios. Also, it is useful, let's say something really big happening, but you are having an other important event that you just need to hold it off and not, break down in tears somewhere. So having that, mentally block it out. But what's important is to come back and process and address it when you have that opportunity. So I think Cameron has posted, the explanation is there.
Yeah, so Cameron saying, understanding that the problems that stress us out are human problems, and that if we focus our emotions on concepts such as hope, faith, and love, and believe that our true happiness comes after this life, many of the things that cause us stress are due to our pride or attachment to power, position, titles, or material possessions.
Okay, thank you so much, Cameron, for clarifying. I have kind of double-sided view of that, because from one side, it is wonderful to focus on concepts of what I call elevated emotions: hope, faith, love, compassion, kindness, happiness. On the practical component, though, personally, and seeing it with clients, sometimes it's not attainable and achievable. If something bothering and triggering sits inside of you, for me, and I have these negative emotions, I just, no matter how much I try to live away from them and being like, no, I'm grateful, it's so good, I'm happy, I'm kind, I wasn't able. The gap between the emotional state of low emotions and where I try to shoot is too high. And that's where the healing and like gradually lifting it up needs to happen, because otherwise it's wishful thinking, right? We hope that it will get, but something inside of us still does not believe it. And the facts confirm that it's not true. And therefore is just almost feels like a lie to yourself internally. When the emotional gap is not too high, meaning, and not too large, meaning that it bothers you, but not too much, you can override it, then definitely positivity, positive mindset, surrounding yourself with positive people and events, that is amazing. So again, works not always, and we need to be truthful to ourselves and not sitting there and just repeating, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, when really I'm not.
That's great advice. Thank you. So John is asking the question, what's a good strategy to approach someone that's always feeling like a victim to the point that it impedes their growth?
So and thank you, John, for the question. If the victim is not you, meaning like you don't recognize it within yourself, that it's actually really hard to change another person, right? Because they need to recognize that they're choosing victimhood over growth or over opportunities and over possibilities. The best, for what I have seen, is modeling, right? We can talk to them, We can explain to them, we can extend the arm or the hand of help, but unless the person is ready, it's very hard to get through someone. I mean, try to change your spouse, try to change your kids. It's changing someone else is a very challenging task. So modeling that positive behavior, if they come and they're like, oh, poor me, I have da 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 da, not joining their pity party, cutting them short and say thank you and changing the subject, putting positive news and literally not reinforcing that behavior. Hopefully, eventually they will be able to see, or if they're really stuck in that mentality, they'll just go somewhere else and they'll start doing the same thing somewhere else. That's why the company culture is important, right? So if they do it within the company, they cannot just go to the next office and continue their behavior.
That's great. Thank you. So how would you define thinking fresh?
I would say it's being able to rethink your thinking. So freshness comes from challenging our own thinking, beliefs, emotional states. It's revising ourselves constantly and pretty much giving ourselves a rating of satisfaction. Is that how you want to be? Is that how you want to live your life? And doing it frequently, weekly, monthly, daily basis. Are you living with your actions what you aspire to? Because we all want to be kind and happy and compassionate. That's just and growing and learning and developing. That's just built into us in nature. But then with our action, we go on social media and we fight with someone, we go and talk behind somebody else's back, we spend days in bad moods thinking that we'll somehow miraculously change ourselves. So that constant self-awareness of what do you aspire to and what are you actually leaving? Action, action, action. Because I have seen a lot of positive aspirations and not backed up action to it. They need to be congruent into one direction and really focusing on 1 hour at a time. It's the way you have great life is by building every minute, every hour, making that great. And then if from time to time you have a bad day, a bad week, it's okay, as long as the aggregate is in the direction of growth, positivity, and self-development.
That's great. Thank you. So as we kind of wrap up our time together, we only got about 2 minutes left. I'm curious if you could share maybe like a first step that an organization could take to kind of help with these negative emotions of their teammates, build a culture of thinking fresh. What's a good first step as to not like overwhelm an organization, but just be able to get started?
I would say is asking people, having conversations. If having it on a whole organization level, let's say you have hundreds of employees, that may be hard. Doing it by department, right? Doing it from the top down, because it's very foolish to expect that employees going to come and start sharing. That's not how things work, right? Modeling by example, making it as a department, and what Growth Institute and what in general that policy of having values, core values, company culture, including well-being, mental wellness, whatever, how you want to call it, emotional stability, emotional intelligence, including that as part of your core values that you live, you practice, and really having conversations, starting to share it from the leadership and acknowledging that we have different events and things that happening in our lives and not shading away. And what is important is to gradually building trust and follow up with whatever people are sharing. So if they're sharing something that organization will and can help, you must follow up. Otherwise, it's, once you start breaking that trust, there's nothing going to happen there.
Yeah, the follow-up is very important. Thank you for sharing. So we're about at the end of our time. Any final thoughts or recommendations that you'd like to share with the community today, Oksana?
I just want to thank everyone who is here and will be watching recordings. This is absolutely important topic and subject. And if I can be of help any way, please reach out. I'm very searchable on social media, and we'll be having more of these conversations. And whatever you're personally or professionally or as an organization struggling with, you don't have to know all the answers and do it alone. That's why I exist and many other professions exist. So feel free to reach out. And thank you so much for your awareness to this topic, especially in these days.
Thank you so much, Oksana. Thank you to the community for being here, and we'll see you all again next week. Take care.